Dear Workplace Therapist, I've been in my current role as a manager for about 2 years with a well known Fortune 500 company. Last year, my boss and her boss discussed my future with the company, and I was told I was a rising star and they planned to promote within 6 to 8 months, which would have set me up for a promotion at the end of Q2 2020. Due to the recent disruption of COVID-19, I have not yet received the promotion, and worse, I've not gotten any updates from my boss. I know the world is in a pandemic, but I would like to broach the matter with my boss in a way that isn't pushy or insensitive, but provides me with some answers. What is the best way to go about this? Signed, Starstruck.
Yeah, yikes. Totally natural thing. You're ready for your next career move, or you've been promised something, and then we get a global pandemic that basically puts everything on hold. So I would say before we jump into how to have the conversation, probably important to know when to have the conversation. So what we don't know is much about the company other than it's Fortune 500. And also what we don't know is how much they've been impacted by COVID-19. So some companies, you were talking, have lost revenues as much as 40%, maybe even more. Other companies, it's been less significant from that standpoint. So if the company's been really hit hard and they've had to do layoffs, furloughs and layoffs, that's one kind of conversation. So we'll talk about that. If the company's been thriving and doing really well, that's another conversation, okay? Because from all the folks I talk to, it's across the board. Everything from we're shuttering to it's been business as usual for the most part. So let's talk about kind of the worst case scenario. So if it's a really worst case scenario, I would not recommend you go in and say, hey, you promised me this whole thing, 6 to 8 months thing, and now it's time, like we need to have this conversation. I wouldn't go in that kind of directive or aggressive. I would go in and say, hey, I acknowledge the situation we've been in. It's been really, really tough. And under the circumstances, I completely understand that there might be freezes on promotions, let alone other things. But I would like to talk to you about when you think it'd be appropriate to open this discussion. So you basically have the conversation to set up the conversation. And likely that's going to be sometime around Q4, probably end of the year, when things start to stabilize or start to move back into some kind of normal. But again, depending upon the business, we could be looking at 18 months until it gets back to normal. But I do think what is fair is for them to give you a date on when they're willing to talk to you about it. So I think I would ask for that. Now, if it's been business as usual, I think you just say, hey, we've been very fortunate. We've been kind of performing pretty well. We're going to hit our numbers at the end of the year. I'm really excited. And I know all of us have been working really hard. I recognize that COVID has thrown off some of our plans. And I know that originally we talked about moving me into a promotion around Q2. And I understand that couldn't happen, but it's still very much on my radar. So I'd like to set up some time to talk about when we can make that happen in 2020. So I wouldn't necessarily pin them down to a date, but you notice I added that subtle part of when can we make this happen in 2020? And so you remember, as folks who've listened to the show before, one of the main things we're trying to do is drive clarity. Drive clarity. We have these conversations so we can drive clarity. Now, what a lot of hiring managers will do, or leaders, is they're going to try not to let you drive clarity on this conversation. They're going to try and create smoke screens to put it off so they don't have to, go to their boss and make the ask for the money or the raise or mess up the political structure. Because that's what happens. The more higher up we get, and when you get promoted into a certain role, it shifts the political game. That's why you'll see real senior people hesitate on promoting people into more senior roles. Fairly easy to move someone in a manager role, much harder to move them into a vice president role because it messes up the politics and the turf. And so they become more hesitant, gun shy to do that. So just something to kind of be aware of, but you want to kind of pin them down to a date. When can we talk about this? And then if they don't do it, then you can say, oh, clearly this is not the right, probably home for me. And you might want to look for something else.